Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Good Stuff. I'm Kevin Bille, and as always, we're appreciative of you joining us today. Hey, if any of these episodes have added value to your life and you've really enjoyed them, please do me a favor, head on over to YouTube, type in Good Stuff with Kevin. You can hit that subscription button, which allows you to be subscribed, and of course, sign up for the notifications as well. And even in the bottom right-hand corner, you can click on the microphone of the video. So thank you for doing that in advance. Well, hey, today I've got a personal favorite of mine, the head of mental performance from the Tampa Bay Rays, Justin Sua. Justin, it's great to have you, man.
So happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Kevin.
It's nice to, I think I've listened to all 1,300 whatever episodes of the podcast. So I'm not going to go through I'm not going to ask you about every one, but I'm sure we'll touch base. Hey, just explain to the listeners a little bit. You know, I've got a good idea of what you do, but when people hear head of mental performance, you know, in terms of coaching and that role, what exactly is that? Just paint that picture for them.
Yeah, that's, and I've worked over the course of my career to try to distill it down into a one-liner, a simple elevator pitch, if you will. Essentially, my job is to working exclusively with elite athletes, training athletes to become elite decision makers through mental skills training. And when you say, okay, well, let's go a little bit deeper. What's mental skills training? It's basically teaching them principles and strategies from the field of performance psychology and other fields in order to enhance confidence, resilience, focus, arousal control, perform under pressure. And then we have a team of 4 other mental performance coaches who work in the minor leagues. And so yeah, it's helping players and coaches and trying to collaborate with other members of the staff, as you're well aware of, connecting with the nutritionist and strength and conditioning coach and the sports scientist. And so trying to cultivate elite decision makers.
Yeah, well, I think it's awesome. I think it's so needed. It might be talked about enough, but it probably wasn't around as much as it needed to be back in the day. But it's nice to see that it is now because it's so valuable. And just me personally, as I've talked about on here before, Justin, I just think being mentally tough is such a huge thing. I know it's embedded in me through athletics. What comes to mind, I would say, for you with this, and what do the greatest in the world have when it comes to this? Like, are you seeing something that is there a commonality amongst these guys or and girls, or is it different for everybody?
Yeah, I think that is a really good question. I think the first thing because you hear the word mental toughness, which many people talk about. There's hundreds of books, podcasts, articles, videos about mental toughness and what exactly it means. And I think for me, I mean, you can give a lot of different definitions, but I look at mental toughness like physical toughness. There's a lot of different facets or variables to it, whether it be strength and conditioning. It's in the physical side, it's your cardio, it's your strength, it's your plyometrics, it's your flexibility, it's your mobility. There's a lot of components to physical fitness. Same with the mental side as well. You might have someone who's incredibly confident, but they struggle to focus. You might have someone who's really good at focusing, but they don't perform at a high level under pressure. They might perform under pressure, but they don't have a great work ethic. So there's a lot that it entails. There may be some players who have all those things, but they lack cognitive flexibility. They're not flexible. They can't adjust and adapt quickly to the changing environment and the situation. And so to answer your question, I think there are some common threads. One thing, I respect the unique individuality of each player, and you see how different they are from a football player to a baseball player to a CrossFit athlete. A quarterback's different than a receiver. A DB is different than a catcher, than pitcher.
Yeah.
And so respecting the nuances of that, and team sports versus individual sports, there's a lot of nuances.
Yeah.
However, there are some commonalities. They're the best in the world. They know that they're never too good to get better. I think that's a common thread. You're never too good to get better. Another one is they're willing to embrace the boredom of consistency. Those who are the best in the world do those tedious, mundane things day in and day out. And I think Muhammad Ali has one of my favorite quotes, where he's like, I hated every minute of training, but I told myself, suffer now and live the rest of your life a champion. Now, there are some other things as well, from doing things on purpose, with purpose, to learning from failure, that just the best in the world do, willing to seek critical feedback, all that good stuff. And so, yeah, it's neat to see them actually apply it.
Yeah, that's really good. That's interesting how you bring up the sports. I never that makes a lot of sense to me, and I'm going to play a lot of this back for my kids because I tell them to embrace the boredom all the time when I have them go do their ball handling drills. And I think my mental toughness, maybe it didn't start, but I know it was enhanced by those cold baths too when I first got to
Yeah,
college.
there you
All
go.
those
There you
things to get
go.
my mind elsewhere. But one thing that I love you said before about the best, and you kind of alluded to this a little bit, but didn't say it specifically, is that they view the unknown with curiosity, and maybe not fear and all those other things. And I love it. How does one get to that point if they don't already have it? Or if they don't have it, are they able to do it? Like, what would you say to somebody that's listening that, man, I wanna be curious. I get it. I love it. I know why it works, but man, this fear, this uncomfortability that I'm feeling, I can't, what would you say to that, Justin?
That is such a good question. I would say, first of all, take a look if you're listening to this and think about your skill set, whether it be as a leader, as a business professional, as an athlete, as a coach. If you were to, we could turn it into it, symbolize it as a circle. And the more you know, the bigger your circle is. We'll call this your circle of competence. If you're a new beginner, chances are your circles of competence is going to be smaller. If you're very
Mhm.
experienced, it's going to be a lot bigger. Now, the question is, how far can we push? How much do you know? How far, how wide, how big is your circle of competence? Now, the question is obviously not infinity, which means that you would know everything about everything. It's not. And so, number one is understanding, hey, I have limits to my circle of competence. I've gotten it through experience, through coaching, through learning from successes and failures and mentors and other coaches and education. I have a certain circle of competence. Now, my question is, how do you expand it? What can you do to enlarge or broaden your circle of competence? What are your blind spots? Who can help you?
Yes.
Who can help you add to it? Now, I loved what you said. In order to do that, it takes a form of intellectual humility. Number one, you need to be humble and say, I don't know everything. It was Coach
Mhm.
John Wooden of the UCLA men's basketball team who has one of my favorite quotes about this. He says that it's what you learn after you think you know it all that counts. And I think these experts, the best in the world, they know, okay, I don't know this. And it's understanding that, being intellectually humble about that. Then, like you said, I love that word, it's curiosity. What can I do to get better? What can I do to get smarter? How can I learn more? Who can I learn it from? What is a blind spot that I have that someone who I trust could illuminate for me and shine a
Mhm.
light on me? And so it is quite the process. And what's interesting too is the more you know, the broader your circle gets. It's normal to think you might have even more doubts. You might question yourself even more and say, wow, I have more experience, I have more knowledge, so why do I feel less smart? And it gets to the point where you realize how much you don't know.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And as you're talking, it makes me think about my time as a coach. The curiosity is they're just the best players every year were the ones that were the most coachable. They wanted to be coached and coached hard. They watched the most film. They asked the most questions. I mean, I'm reading about Tom Brady, who's my age, and just always, right? He's always trying to be coached, especially now under a new system. Speaking of Tampa, right? But I think that brings up a really good point. One other word that I've heard you say a couple times, is the failure. You deal with a lot of athletes. I love it. I embrace it. I know what it does for me. I've talked to numerous people about this on here, Justin. Like, where does failure fit into all of this and getting people to embrace that, to not necessarily want it or seek it out, but know that it's a part of the process and it's more of my reaction to it than anything else?
I loved how you said what you said. You don't necessarily seek it out, but know it is part of the process. One thing that we talk about all the time is that you sign up for the hard road the moment you decide to commit to going after your dreams. That's the moment you signed up for the failures. You signed up for the struggle. The moment you decided to pursue greatness or to pursue an elite level of whatever you're going after. And what a lot of people are afraid of is they're afraid to view failure and stare it in the face. They're afraid to learn those lessons because it's embarrassing. It triggers negative emotional responses. It's sad to work extremely hard for something and then come up short. That's a very tough pill to swallow for a lot of people. But I mean, you go back and look at any Kobe Bryant interview as he
Mhm.
talks about learning from failure and staring at it and watching the tape. And I think that is critical to success. And I have a front row view to the best in the world doing it, to seeing these athletes who are at the highest level of their profession and then come off out of the cage or come off practice and ask their coach, hey, what do you see? What can I do better?
Yeah.
Like their coach has never been on their level, but they're still humble enough to say, I want to surround myself with people who don't just want to make me feel better, but they want to help me be better. And if you're on that pursuit of greatness, failure, you not only have to embrace it, but you have to learn from it. It's still painful, it's still hard, it's still embarrassing, but you know that's part of the process.
Yeah, and I think that part of the process is it's unique to me because I think that almost becomes a separator at times because every level you've got your elite, and of course when you get to the level you're at, they're the elite, right? But there's still a separator there, and so in your position, knowing some of this and what we're talking about, what's the hardest part about your job? Is it getting these athletes to understand some of these things about the mentality because maybe they've just been talented enough and they've gotten by to that point. I don't want to speak for you obviously here, but is that something? Am I safe to assume that that's a tough part in getting them to grasp some of those things, or is there something else?
Yeah, you know, it's difficult. There's a lot of different reasons why it's difficult, and it's different working with a minor league baseball player versus the major leaguer, a college athlete versus a high school athlete. There's a lot of differences. Single sport athletes versus group athletes, even different types of personalities. So there's a lot of different facets to it. But globally, if a universal difficulty is one of the things about high performers is they have a very tight circle of trusted confidants, people who they allow in their circle. And one thing about our minds and our brains is n- for you, for me to give somebody access to what I'm thinking, to how I'm feeling, to how I process things. That's a very vulnerable state, and
Yeah,
you're
for
not just going to
sure.
share those thoughts with anybody. You need to know that you can trust this person. You need to know that this person isn't going to take what they say and run and tell other coaches and other people and put it on social media. It's like
Yeah.
no, you need to build. The hardest part in a single sentence is building relationships so strong they can bear the weight of truth. I heard that first from Dr. Tim Elmore years and years ago, and I love that, and I think that is the hardest part. And then number two is I am not necessarily, my role isn't to be a disseminator of truth and knowledge. I'm not here to shove mental skills tools down anyone's throat, rather to highlight the skills and the tools and the
Yeah,
principles that they already live by.
that's
They're the
good.
best in the world. They've already got here. And so now I ask, hey, what's your take on failure? What's your take on work? What about growth? How do you view this? What's your process here? And as they share with me what they share, I'm able to shine a light on it and say, oh, that's called um, that does this, and this is what the science says. That's why it's beneficial. So not necessarily giving them a new tool, but helping them uncover and reveal the tools that they're already using.
Yeah, and reinforcing. Well, hey, Tim Elmore was actually on here a couple episodes, Justin. I can tell you, after I was done with him, I felt like a terrible parent. And talk about exposing me. Um, what about you? Like specifically, if you don't mind, like, are there some specific things that you can do as a person if somebody's listening and they're maybe not as to either become positive or maybe stay positive? Like I just feel like you're a really positive guy. I mean, it's impressive, to see that consistency when it comes to you. So what would you say to people? Because I think that obviously has an impact on the job that they have to do, whatever that hat is that they're wearing, a role that is. So is there anything that you could provide to them?
Yeah, I would say first of all is to respect how everyone is wired. I think everyone has a natural disposition to do certain things. Some are more organized than others. Some are more extroverted than introverted. Some are more wired to be a little bit more positive. Some are wired to be a little bit more high strung. And so I will say that I'm a combination of DNA combined with parents who are very positive and who that's just how I was raised. It wasn't even a lot of I get a lot. Hey, is it the reason you're positive is because of your education? Is like, no, this is how I am when I was 5 years old. That's just
Right.
how I was raised. So that's number one. But in terms of someone who wants to be more positive, I think it starts with understanding that we naturally have a negativity bias. To understand that it's easy to be negative, it's easier to see your shortcomings, to compare yourself to other people. And so, training yourself to flex those optimistic muscles through gratitude every single day, by training yourself to ask and identify what is the positive. One thing we did with our kids, especially when they were younger, not so much that they're older. I think if I asked my kids, they'd know these three questions. But when they were younger, every single night until they're into middle, they're all teenagers now. In elementary school, I asked them three questions every night. Number one, what was the best part about today? And the purpose of that was to help them learn to scan their day throughout their day, because they knew dad and mom were going to ask this question: what was the best part? Number two is what is something you learned today? And what we wanted to teach with that is to scan their environment for lessons, learning from failure, learning from first person experiences, even learning from other people, your classmates, your siblings. And then last was, what are you going to do better tomorrow? To learn that, to help them realize they're in the driver's seat. What are you going to do better tomorrow? And I don't think it's necessarily the magic of the questions, but to use what you said, it was consistency. I think asking them from 2 years old all the way to 10, 11, 12, sporadically
Yep.
will still do it, but they just got consistent with having a scaffold or a framework to view the world. And I would say, what is your framework? What questions do you want to ask yourself at the end of the day? And then be consistent in asking yourself those questions. And that should help you develop a frame or a lens through which you view the world.
Yeah, for sure. Good stuff for sure. And maybe I'm asking a question that you could answer the same exact way, but I'd just be curious because it's so funny. I literally this morning had coffee with somebody, and I heard you. Then I came back this morning, listened to something, then I heard you say the same thing to somebody. But I use the start, stop, keep all the time with my kids. I about a month, every month I try to give them the index card, and I just love that connection with my kids, and then to be able to be vulnerable enough for them to tell me what to stop doing. But you're a dad, you're a husband, you've got a job. I know how crazy your life is without knowing everything, and you probably know how crazy my life is, and the same thing. So you got a lot going on, as do a lot of our listeners. Like, are there any other best practices that you have in place that you could suggest? I'm not saying to necessarily balance, but just keep things somewhat even keel for all their roles in their lives. Something like maybe that exercise, or what you alluded to earlier, just maybe a little bit more in depth for this parent, whatever your job is, all
Yeah.
that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I think first of all, to understand a couple of first principles before we get into some strategies or tactics that may or may not work for the listener. But I think first of all, if you're striving to be the best mom you're trying to be, or dad you're trying to be, or husband or wife or entrepreneur, business leader, just know that it is going to be very stressful. You're going to constantly have these feelings that you're not enough, that you're measuring up. You're not measuring up. When you're at work, you're going to think, oh, I'm a terrible husband and father, or mother and
Yeah.
wife. Or when you're at home, you're like, oh, I should be working out. Or you're going to constantly have this perpetual feeling of just strain, like I'm not good enough, and stress that there should be something else I could be doing. So once you can navigate that and normalize and realize, okay, this is completely normal for the high performer in any domain. So understanding that when you do get those feelings, you can smile and say, okay, I'm not alone. All high performers in the world feel like this. That's number one. Number two, I think I would share the illustration. At the circus, I don't know if you've ever heard of these people who are able to spin plates on sticks.
Hmm.
So at a circus, you have like these plate spinners. And it's amazing. They have these sticks and they're able to spin all of these different plates on these random sticks. Now, what's interesting is they use the laws of physics. It takes a lot more energy to get it going. But then once it's going, all you need to do is tap it, just a little bit of a tap. Now, I view my life as a mental performance coach, as a father, as a husband, my spiritual life, all these things, my physical health, my mental health, as these plates I'm spinning. And instead of looking at it like, oh, I have to keep the momentum, to establish habits or routines around each one that can serve as taps. And the moment you neglect one of those plates, it falls and it crashes. And then all of a sudden you got to go pick it up and spend the energy to get that one going. And then the other ones start wobbling a little bit. And knowing that some plates are made out of rubber and that can bounce up quick, and then some are glass, like your relationships that are very important. If that one breaks, like your health, if your health plate breaks, it will derail everything. And so I would establish, what are your plates and what can you do to tap that plate as often and consistently as you possibly can. And to know, yet again, you're going to have these different feelings tugging and pulling you. I'm big on a morning routine. I am huge on win the morning. In the first 90 minutes of my day, I know what I'm doing, whether it be reading, meditating, working out, and then hopefully no matter where I am in the country, where I am in the world, whatever hotel room I'm in, whether we're playing the Yankees or Dodgers, or I'm at home in the off season, you better believe that at this time I'm doing my morning routine. And I'm just relentless with that. So I had to make sure that it's flexible too, that I can do it anywhere. If it becomes too stringent, then it's not pliable and flexible. So that's something that I try to do.
Yeah, that's a great illustration. That is really really good, and I agree. And it's funny because you just 10 years ago, 5 years ago, even a year ago, you're always adjusting and adapting to those. But I would just encourage the people that are listening to find out what that is for you. You talked about those habits. I'm a massive James Clear guy. That's been a game changer for me. And just getting right, especially in the morning, because I know if I get up and my mornings are crazy, I don't get into my quiet time and reading of the word and some of that first before I do some of those, I'm all over the place. So
I
yeah,
am as
that's
well.
awesome. That's really really good. Um, One other thing I think that I think I've heard you say this as well, if I'm not mistaken, but that I've just come to learn from high level achievers, and I'm inconsistent with this. Um, but they're able they're able to learn what to ignore, instead of give attention to that. At least I find that to be something that sticks out. How are you able to do this, or the athletes that are around? I mean, maybe you would agree or disagree with that statement, but to me, it allows it when I'm able to ignore, I'm able to be more present, which allows me to be more successful and build that relationship or do that project or whatever it is. So is this relatable to you as well, Justin?
100%. I think one of the best ways to train yourself to focus is to, like you said, learn what to ignore. And in the world where we are bombarded with information and with pings and dings and
Yeah.
notifications and the shiny things of life pulling and tugging at our attention, there are three things that are limited, that are a limited resource: our time. We only have so much time a day, or in our life, our willpower. You only have so
Mhm.
much ability, and your attention. It's a precious commodity that we
Yeah.
don't have a lot of. And so to be able to, as Stephen Covey says, the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing.
Yeah.
And I think establishing your main thing will give you those blinders like horses have, to be able to lock in on the things that matter most. And I think it was Charlie Munger who has a quote. And when I first heard it, I didn't think anything of it, but now I think about it quite often. He goes, Charlie Munger is the business partner of what is his name? Berkshire Hathaway, richest Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett's go-to guy, one of his best friends. And he said, I stop seeking, or I don't seek brilliance. I seek not to be stupid. And so what he goes on to say is, a lot of times it's a lot easier to not be stupid than it is to be brilliant. And by not making those common, simple mistakes, you're going to make so much more progress than the people who just keep tripping over those preventable mistakes that they keep just getting tripped over. And so I think we could apply it to our own lives. What keeps tripping you up? what keeps derailing your focus? And then how can you create your environment to be able to, like James Clear says, to make good habits easy to do
Yep.
and bad habits hard to do. And I think it comes with environmental design, nudge theory, a little how you design your phone, where you put your phone, and then personal feedback. I think feedback is critical. Spending time every day to think and to look back at your life, at your own performance and say, okay, where am I getting tripped up? How am I sleeping? Where's my energy?
Yeah.
How did I do today? I think we going back and then writing it down in your journal, even like a decision-making journal, and saying, okay, I'm struggling with this. I need to build habits or an environment to help prevent me falling into this mistake.
Yeah, and I'm just going to inject for people listening to one of the things you said earlier about gratitude. I got back to this here in the new year. Literally, first thing I do when I wake up, the alarm goes off. One thing, I write one thing down immediately, and I keep it. Whether that takes me 10 seconds or 5 minutes, I spend that time. And then, Kevin Eastman, the Wilt list, WILT, what I learned today. That's another exercise people can do at night, to your point. One thing that I want to talk about, I know that we have a lot of leaders, Justin, but you've alluded to before what it takes to be a great follower. And I don't think that's something that a lot of people talk about. Dive into this a little bit more and why that's so crucial to success, because I think you have to know when to follow, when to lead, even if you are the leader per se. But I think there's assistant coaches listening, there's assistant GMs, whatever it might be. And to me, it's like, we had Brendan Surr on here, he's been an assistant forever. He's just really, really, really good at that role, right? I mean, there's some people that are made for that. And they have figured out how to be a great follower. What do you see when it comes to that concept?
Yeah, I think there's a quote out there that says, he or she with the least amount of blind spots wins. And I find that so intriguing to me. I think the best leaders are the ones who have tremendous perspective. They're the ones with a combination of humility combined with curiosity, combined with competence, combined with compassion and caring, and then knowing who they are and leaning into their strengths. And in order to be a great follower, it takes those things. It takes humility. It takes knowing that, okay, what can I learn? And when I think about following, it's not just following one person, the current leader. It's being able to look to your left and to your right and to see who you can follow, surrounding yourself with fountains, even from other industries.
Good.
And for those who are listening, if you want to when was the last time you deeply studied negotiation and how that can help you? Or when's the last time you studied design or advertisers, or how stand-up comedians tell stories? When was the last time you studied how a surgeon makes checklists or pilots right before they take off? When was the last time you studied a scientist and how they do deductive reasoning and Socratic questioning to be able to get to better answers? And so part of being a great follower is realizing that your industry, your education it still has some blind spots to it. And so go and follow and learn from other people, which will once again enlarge in your circle of competence. And it'll give you this lattice work of mental models to be able to view things. And then you'll be able to be a better leader for others because you have a better perspective. And it'll help you also not get tripped up into your own biases and your own thinking traps. And you'll realize, okay, I'm probably not viewing this properly. Let me go get an outside perspective. And so there's a lot of benefits from being a follower. There's a general manager, I won't say his name, but there's a general manager for a team who is friends with me, who's not with my current team. And my buddy was telling me a story of this guy who's now a general manager of a major sports team. And he said, when he was with our organization, what he would do, he wasn't the general manager. He would go and sit with the scouts for a long time and ask everything he could about scouts because he wanted to learn. And then he went and he sat with the analytics team. And then he went and sat with the sports science team. And then he went into the coach's office and sat with the coaches, not because he was positioning himself to run the entire show. It's because he cared so much about those who he worked with in his department and the players. He said, if I'm going to help the most I can for my organization, then I want to learn everybody. I want to be the ultimate collaborator. I want to perpetuate other people's initiatives. I want to be able to sit down and say, okay, how does a scout view this? How does the analytics team view it? How does the coach view it? How is not because he was a scout, a coach, or whatever, but because he wanted to use everyone else's experiences. And what do you know? He's a general manager for a major sports team right now, and that's one of his big character traits, from what I hear, is his insatiable desire to learn.
That's awesome. That's really good. I had actually just read something the other day about Kobe after I think it was '08, maybe when they lost the Celtics. He went and met with a guy for the orchestra.
Yeah.
That here's this guy that's leading this orchestra and getting all these different, different instruments all on the same page to make beautiful music. And I thought, man, such an outside the box thing that he was able to do to then bring back and pour into others, and within that culture, if you will. Speaking of culture, it's obviously it's such a buzzword and it's thrown around a lot, but I do think that the best programs truly have it, characteristics of it. They place an emphasis on it. It's obvious to me that that's the case with the Rays and just in general. What is it that's special about their culture, or just in general, maybe some cultures that you've seen that they have, or that they're, the ones that don't have it, they're missing X, Y, and Z?
I have been incredibly grateful for the opportunity over the course of my career to be able to go into different organizations, whether it be with the U.S. Army and the culture of the soldiers there when we were with them for 2 years, and then the IMG Academy, the culture there, and then the Boston Red Sox. We won the World Series in 2018. Then the Cleveland Browns when we were 0-16. I was in there in the locker room. I very, very well aware of the culture that was there. And then with the Tampa Bay Rays, WWE Wrestling Federation, Google. So to see these organizations and to feel the energy and the vibe of the culture. To be more specific about the Rays, one thing that I really, it starts with the leadership. It really starts with the leader and this culture of be yourself. You're safe to be who you are. This notion of psychological safety. Not only are you going to fail, but we're expecting you to push the limits and we're expecting you to fail. You're going to break some windows, just don't burn down the house. And that's okay. And we're going to celebrate the lessons we learn from failure, especially a sport like baseball where you fail all the time. And when you have a leader who is encouraging you to give your best, who's encouraging you to be a great teammate, who's encouraging you to fail and to push the limits, not just through word, but through deed, that sends an amazing message to everybody to say, hey, let's go out there and pay it forward and be great, be an elite teammate, give our best effort. And if we fail, we fail. Because a lot of cultures struggle because of their framing around failure. If I fail, and they're going to protect themselves, it's easy to blame other people if they fail. I don't want to fail because just how it's framed in the organization. But if you have an organization where you feel you're safe to take some risks and put your head out there a little bit and fail, and you're not going to get your head chopped off, then that's going to be a powerful organization.
Yeah, it's I think as a player, I always remember, and I tried to remember that as a coach as much as I screwed up on it, but just to enable them to have that freedom and not feel so tight, that if he makes a mistake, I'm going to get pulled, because then I don't think they're physically and mentally then able to execute.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, one thing I'd be curious to know, Justin, as we kind of wrap up here, just some other things personally. How do you stay focused on your purpose, or even how do you get your athletes to stay focused on their purpose? And how often is that purpose changing in your life or their life, depending on if maybe their purpose was just to make the league. And then once they've gotten to that point and they've done that, I think there's got to be something to level up then. So whether you want to speak to that personally, or maybe how you deal with some of the athletes when it comes to that, I'd love to hear your feedback for the people that are listening, because we all have a purpose, right?
Right. Right. I think if you were to ask some people who are listening to this, hey, what's your purpose or what's your why is another way to ask it. They'd be able to look you in the face and tell you, this is my why. And then there are some people who still don't know, or they're wondering, or they think how difficult that is, or they think, okay, I don't know how to do this. And for those people who are questioning on if they have the right one, does it look like, How do I discover my own? I want to touch on that a little bit. To your point, when I was with the Browns, I had a player come in and he was kind of going through the motions. He was just going through the motions. He's in his second year in the NFL. And as we're talking, oh, I want to discover my why. I want to, he goes, I want to, oh, I'm going through the motions. And I asked, if you don't mind sharing with me, what's your why? What's your purpose? And in the middle, and he goes, my purpose is to play in the NFL. And he stopped himself in the middle of saying it because it was that moment when he realized my why is to play in the NFL.
Yeah.
And I'm in my second year in the NFL. And it was funny how he caught himself. He said, that is so interesting. My whole life through high school, through college, my why is what drove me. And now I'm kind of stagnating, going through the motions. And it wasn't until that moment he realized his why is stale. Not only is it stale, he accomplished it. And his entire situation is different. And so he created a brand new why. I can't remember exactly what it was off the top of the head, but wouldn't you know it, that was a simple little thing. We didn't talk about mental skills training necessarily. It was like he just needed a why to reconnect to. So your why can change. Your why can get stale. Your why is yours. A lot of people want the perfect why because they want it to sound good to others. They want people to applaud for them, say, wow, what a noble why. Well, if your why is to make millions of dollars so you can have a really nice house, then so be it. What is it? Right. My question is, what does it do to you? And if it lights a fire in your heart, if it makes you happy, if it makes you excited, I've even heard some guys where their why makes them mad. It brings tears to their eyes. It makes them angry. And hey, you know what? If that's what drives you, it's what does your why do to you? And then again, you don't have to share it with anybody. It's completely up to you. I had somebody who shared their why with me, and he goes, "Oh, I can't be that because my pastor won't like that." I was like, "What do you mean? Like, do you have to share this with your pastor?" He goes, "No." I was like, "Oh, well, then." It was funny because he realized, oh, I guess I don't have to share it with anybody. It's whatever it is to me. And then lastly, about the why is you can create a temporary why. Maybe you don't know your capital W why or your capital P purpose, but you can have a why what's your why for this 6 months? What's your why for the next 3 months?
That's good.
If you need to shrink it even more, what's your why? Yeah. What's your why for this month? What's your why for this workout? What's your why for today? And if that's what you need to start with and start stringing together days driven by a why, then you'll see what really drives. You can take it out on a test drive. That's completely okay. And so we talk about that often. We even myself, are just reconnecting to my why, and sometimes it changes, and sometimes it has to do with my family, sometimes my faith, sometimes my career. But I used to get really tangled up in it has to be the one perfect thing, and I realize how it ebbs and it flows and it evolves.
Yeah, I love that. I don't mean this but I would think maybe the younger generation putting it in a shorter gap, I would think they'd have more success with that maybe than that might be a variance. Like you said, there's no right or there's no wrong. Same thing with this question. I think success can probably be defined in so many different ways. What does that look like to you? And do you see that as something that's different for all sorts of people that you deal with?
You couldn't have said it any better. You can even, if you ask me that question today, I might give you a different answer next week or the 100%. Week after, even like what is success to you? I think the context of the person's situation is different, and it constantly flows and changes. For me personally, my definition, my personal kind of universal definition of success is it's going to sound very trite and very simplistic, but knowing that I gave my absolute best today. And knowing that my best is going to look different from day to day. Can I quantify that? No. Do I need to quantify it? No. I really don't. But I know, the man in the mirror between me and myself, I know if I'm giving my best as a husband or as a dad. Yeah. And yeah, that's a very high standard that I have for myself. But it might change. It might evolve. There might be certain metrics in different places. And I think the key to anyone's personal success is making sure it's yours. It's your own personal private scoreboard. You don't have to worry about winning on somebody else's scoreboard. How many followers, how many likes, how much money. It's what matters to you, and really going back to those blinders, being able to ignore everyone else's expectations of
Yes.
success for you. It's a what is, and even as a parent, as you probably know, I need to make sure that I don't shove my definition of success down my kids' throat and say helping them create their own. And that's a slippery slope. Sometimes the lines get blurred, and we're parents and they're teenagers. But yeah, I think that's a really good question, and it's so different from person to person. And I love to see with professional athletes how their purpose or their definition of success evolves over time. I've seen it time and time again.
Yeah, that's good because it's so funny. A couple of weeks ago, I was on somebody else's podcast and they asked me, and I told them, if you would ask me when I was 13 or 23 or 33 or now 40, it's different, even to the point now where it is that I just try to win today. If I can just get the most out of it, then, I'm happy with that. Hey, just in closing, before we get to rapid fire, tell us some ways, Justin, how do you learn? How do you get better? I know that you're somebody that's constantly trying to push the envelope with that. So what are your ways?
You said the word. I'm very consistent in making sure learning is part of my everyday routine. I build that into my when the morning routine. I'm a firm believer that if you read what everybody reads and listen to what everyone listens to, you're going to have and know the same things everybody else does. And so I am passionate about learning from other industries, as I alluded to earlier in this podcast, making a deliberate approach to study advertisers or surgeons or science or biology or physics. I'm buying books where people are like, why would you buy that book? It's because I'm trying to learn first principles from other domains to be able to be just have a more robust toolbox to
Yeah.
be able to make these connections and help different people, and not get so inundated in one myopic view of performance psychology. What does microeconomics say about it? What does this basketball coach say about it? What does this scientist say about it? What does this teacher say about it? This artist? And so that is like learning. I am constantly learning and trying to evolve.
Yeah, that's really good. Any favorite books that you have?
As of right now, I could tell you right now what I'm reading. It's called The Great Mental Models by Shane Parrish.
Oh yeah, he's good.
One of my favorite,
Paris is good. Yeah.
outstanding. Another great one is Think Twice. I have it right here. Think Twice by Michael Mauboussin,
Yep.
Maubussin. Think Twice talks about intuition. And again, going back to it's a prospect theory, microeconomics, decision making, all that kind of stuff. I'm fascinated by that.
That's great. Well, hey, we're going to test out your jumper here and go for three
Okay.
pointers. All right. So
Okay.
three questions to finish. Number one, if people could, so much in here, truly good stuff. If they could learn one thing from this talk and just, you want them to take one thing away and really hold on to it, what would it be?
You are always a work in progress. Keep evolving. That's the
Love it.
one takeaway.
It's good. If Justin could have came over here today and been Kevin and asked Justin a question, what question would have you asked that I did not ask or get to today?
Wow, what an amazing question. I would have asked me, how hard is it to apply what you do professionally to being a father with your own home?
That's really good because I meant to say earlier, my biggest weakness as a parent probably is I'm a coach at home and I just need to be a parent. Do you want to elaborate a little bit on your question that you would have asked yourself?
No.
I love it.
No. So it's funny. It's hilarious.
That's great.
It's funny because I wrote a book called Parent Pep Talks, and it basically 10 must-have mental skills for parents to teach their kids. And I remember with the publisher, they asked me to write it. And I was like, no, I'm not going to write this book. They're like, why don't you want to be a published author? I was like, not in the parent advice section. Like, I am the worst dad. And then I think like I'm very hard on myself. But yeah, I find it very difficult in getting these loving nudges from my wife to say, oh, I thought I heard you do a podcast on this, and
Yeah, right.
it'd be good to practice that right now. And it'd be good to be less emotional. And But yes, it is like you said, I am human and I struggle and I come up short. And there's a lot of I'm sorry's and okay, daddy could have done it a little bit better
Yeah.
this way, and help me understand being more non-judgmental with my own kids than I am with the people I work with.
Yeah, that's good. The greatest form of humility in my life is at home. Hey,
Yes.
finally, Justin, number three, good stuff is the name of this. What's some good stuff that you can give us in closing, that maybe anything you feel is appropriate in our world today, this conversation, anything that you would deem good stuff?
Yeah, I think this notion of catching people winning and talking good about people behind their back. I think that's really good stuff. I think it would
Yes,
be
it
really
is.
cool if everyone listening to this would just pull out your phone and just text someone who you really appreciate, who you haven't reached out to in a long time, and with nothing in return, just what you appreciate about them, what they've done for you, how they've inspired you. And man, I think it's an amazing practice. Is something to do that it could immediately change someone's day.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, great. 3 for 3 there, my man.
Awesome.
Hey, where can our listeners connect to you social media wise? Where's the best places they can find you?
Yeah, so I'm all social media accounts. I'm really active on Twitter and on Instagram and LinkedIn as well. But Justin Sua, JUSTINSUA, and then in the links, I mean, you'll find my other accounts. You'll find a link to my books and then my podcast.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to pick up that book there to help me out. And I love your Twitter feed. You know, for anybody that
Thanks, brother.
I'm just new to Instagram. These young guys are pushing me, but your Twitter feed's great. In fact, a couple of weeks ago, it's so funny. I used an example of the grocery store example of your Twitter feed, you know, with our owner, which was
Awesome.
awesome. And hey, how about you just fill everybody in a little bit on your podcast? As I alluded to earlier, I listen to it a ton. It's unique, and I'll let you tell that story. It doesn't take as long as this one would, but you know, talk to them a little bit about that, where they can find it.
Yeah, so you can find it on anywhere you listen to podcasts. It's called the Increase Your Impact podcast. It's an episode that's released every weekday, and we're on episode 1336. The
Yeah.
episodes are only 2 to 4 minutes long, and it all stemmed from years ago, about in 2016, when I realized there are a lot of youth athletes out there who don't have access to a mental performance coach. I said, okay, let me be their mental performance coach and provide one tool a day, one principle a day. And I was told by someone, it's the podcast for people who don't have time to listen to podcasts. And so it's very short, quick to the point. Yeah, would love to have people join me.
Yeah, but it's just full of great information. Well, hey Justin, thanks a ton, man. I love what you do. I love what you're about. I appreciate, you know, your positive, upbeat approach. You know, it's no secret how much influence and impact you have. So just keep up that, and we really appreciate you spending some time with us here today.
Thank you so much, Kevin. So grateful to be on this.
Yeah, well, hey, we continue to look forward to hearing from you. A lot of you have reached out via social media. You know, once again, you can find us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and you can always email me at goodstuffkevin@gmail.com. Keep those comments coming. Let us know what you think of this episode with Justin. I know I'm going to go back and listen to it myself and find out ways that I can apply it in my life. So thanks again for spending some time with us today. And until next time, good stuff.